Gideon's Story, Part 2, The Victory of Faith. Hello, dear friend. Welcome back to this quiet space, a place of rest and peace. Tonight, we continue the story of Gideon, a man who learned that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. When we last left Gideon, he had experienced something remarkable: the fleece. First wet while the ground stayed dry, then dry while the ground was soaked with dew. Two signs, two confirmations, God's patient answer to a fearful heart. And now, Gideon stands on the edge of the greatest test of his faith. The army is gathered, 32,000 men, but God has other plans. Plans that will show everyone, including Gideon, that victory belongs to the Lord alone. So settle into your resting place now. Let your breathing slow deep and easy. Feel the weight of your body supported beneath you. Release the tensions of your day one by one, letting them drift away like leaves on a gentle stream. Tonight's story is about impossible odds and the God who specializes in the impossible. It's about learning to trust even when everything seems backwards, even when God's ways don't make sense to our human understanding. Let the story wash over you. Don't work to remember every detail. Just rest and listen, and let these ancient truths find their way into your heart. Breathe deeply. Let peace settle over you like a soft blanket. And let us begin. Gideon had sent messengers throughout the land, from Manasseh to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, calling the men of Israel to rise and fight for their freedom. Word spread quickly, carried by hope and desperation alike. Farmers laid down their plows, shepherds left their flocks, and men from every village gathered under Gideon's banner. Though they were weary and outnumbered, their hearts burned with the courage of those who believed that God Himself would fight for them. The camp at the Spring of Herod was alive with the sounds of an army preparing for battle. 32,000 men, warriors from the tribes of Israel. They had answered Gideon's call, coming down from the hills and valleys, ready to face the Midianites who filled the valley below like locusts. So many Midianites and Amalekites that their camels could not be counted, like grains of sand on the seashore. Fires flickered in the night as men sharpened their swords and whispered prayers into the darkness. The scent of dust and iron filled the air. Yet even among their fear, there was a quiet strength, a hope that the God of their fathers still watched over them. For though they stood before an army beyond number, they believed that victory did not come by the sword, but by the hand of the Lord. As Gideon walked through the camp that morning, God spoke to him, and what God said made no earthly sense at all. "You have too many men." Gideon stopped. Too many? He looked down at the valley, at the vast Midianite camp spread out below. The odds were already impossibly against them. And God said, "There were too many?" "If I let all these men fight," God continued, "Israel will boast that they saved themselves by their own strength. They will forget that I am the one who delivers them." And so God gave Gideon an instruction that must have seemed utterly mad. "Announce to the people, whoever is fearful and afraid may turn back." Imagine Gideon's voice as he made that announcement. Anyone who is afraid, anyone who is fearful, you may go home. You are free to leave. For a moment, silence, then movement. One man stood, then another, then groups of them. They gathered their belongings, and they left. 22,000 men walked away that morning. 2/3 of the army simply gone. 10,000 remained. And Gideon watched them go, perhaps feeling his own fear rising in his chest. But God wasn't finished. There are still too many, the Lord said to Gideon. Take them down to the water. I will test them for you there. So Gideon led the 10,000 down to the spring. The water was cool, inviting. The men were thirsty from the heat and the preparation for battle. Watch how they drink, God told Gideon. Separate those who lap the water with their tongues like a dog from those who kneel down to drink. It was a strange test, but Gideon watched carefully. Most of the men, exhausted and thirsty, knelt down and put their faces into the water to drink deeply. But 300 men, only 300, cupped water in their hands and lapped it quickly, staying alert, keeping their eyes up, watching for danger, even as they drank. 300 men out of 10,000. With these 300 men, God said, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home. And so it happened. The army that had been 32,000 was now just 300, less than 1% of what they'd started with. Against an enemy that was numberless as sand. By every human calculation, this was suicide. But Gideon was learning. He was learning that God's arithmetic works differently than ours. That when God says he will do something, the size of the army doesn't matter. The odds don't matter. Only God's promise matters. Still, Gideon was human. And that night, as darkness fell over the valley, God knew that his servant needed one more reassurance. Get up, God said to Gideon. Go down to the camp of Midian. I am giving it into your hands. But if you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah and listen to what they are saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack the camp. Even in this final moment, God met Gideon's fear with such tenderness. If you are afraid, no condemnation, just an invitation to have his courage strengthened. So Gideon and Purah crept down the hillside in the darkness, past the sentries, into the edges of the vast Midianite camp. The campfires stretched out like stars across the valley floor. The sounds of soldiers, the smell of cooking fires, the snorting of countless camels. They moved quietly, carefully, until they came near one of the tents. And there they stopped, crouching in the shadows, listening. Inside the tent, a soldier was speaking. His voice carried on the night air. I had a dream, the soldier said to his companion. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. A barley loaf, the bread of the poor, the bread of insignificant people. His friend responded, and in his response, Gideon heard the voice of God confirming everything. This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. In the darkness, Gideon must have closed his eyes, the enemy themselves speaking of their own defeat, acknowledging that God had already given them into Israel's hands. They were afraid. They knew what was coming. Gideon bowed down and worshipped right there, in the middle of the enemy camp, because he finally understood. The battle was already won. God had already decided. All that remained was to walk in obedience. When they returned to the Israelite camp, Gideon's voice rang out strong and clear. "Get up, the Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." He divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he gave each man a trumpet and an empty jar with a torch inside it. Strange weapons for a battle. No swords, no spears, just trumpets and jars and fire. "Watch me," Gideon said. "Follow my lead. When I reach the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then you blow yours all around the camp and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" It was the middle of the night, the darkest part, the time when watchmen grow drowsy and soldiers sleep deeply. Gideon and his 300 approached the Midianite camp from 3 directions, silently, carrying their covered torches and their trumpets. They reached the edge of the camp. The changing of the guard had just taken place. Fresh sentries, alert but unsuspecting. And then, at Gideon's signal, it happened. 300 trumpets blasted into the night air. 300 jars smashed against rocks. 300 torches blazed suddenly in the darkness surrounding the camp, and 300 voices shouted as one, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." The Midianite camp exploded into chaos. Men jolted awake in terror, seeing lights all around them, hearing trumpets blaring, thinking they were surrounded by a massive army. In the darkness and confusion, they couldn't see that it was only 300 men. They saw only fire and heard only the sound of certain doom. The Midianites grabbed their weapons and began striking at anyone near them, not realizing they were killing their own men. Panic spread like wildfire. The entire camp became a scene of pandemonium and fear. And the 300 Israelites, they simply stood their ground, holding their torches high, blowing their trumpets, shouting their battle cry. They didn't need to fight. God was fighting for them. The Midianite army, that numberless horde, broke and ran. They fled down the valley toward Beth Shittah, toward Zerera, toward the border of Abel Maholah, running in blind terror from an enemy they never even engaged. The Lord caused the entire Midianite army to turn on each other with their swords. Those who survived the chaos fled, and God brought other Israelite tribes into the battle to pursue them. The men of Naphtali, Asher, and all Manasseh were called out. The Ephraimites captured the fords of the Jordan, cutting off the Midianites' escape. It was a complete victory, an impossible victory, a victory that 300 men could never have achieved on their own, which was exactly the point. After the battle, after the pursuit, there was a moment of tension. The Ephraimites were upset. "Why didn't you call us when you first went to fight Midian?" they demanded of Gideon. They felt slighted, left out of the glory. And here Gideon showed how much he had grown. The fearful man threshing wheat in a winepress had become wise. "What have I accomplished compared to you?" he said humbly. Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim's grapes better than the full grape harvest of Abiezer? God gave Oreb and Zeb, the Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you? Soft words, humble words, words that turned away wrath and brought peace. The pursuit continued. Gideon and his 300, now exhausted, crossed the Jordan. They were spent, weary beyond measure, but still pursuing. The Midianite kings Zebah and Zalmunna were fleeing with what remained of their army, 15,000 men out of the 135,000 who had started. When Gideon asked for bread for his exhausted men at the town of Sukkoth, the officials refused. Why should we give bread to your army? You haven't captured Zebah and Zalmunna yet. At Peniel, the same response, the same refusal. The men of the city turned their faces away, unwilling to risk their comfort for a weary band of warriors. Their hearts were hardened by fear of what might happen if Gideon failed, fear of the Midianites' revenge. They spoke words of caution, but behind them lay selfishness and doubt. The cries of the hungry went unanswered, and the fire of brotherhood grew cold. In that moment, the divide between faith and fear was laid bare, and Gideon felt the sting not only of rejection, but of sorrow. Sorrow that his own people could not see the hand of God already moving among them. Gideon remembered their words. The cold refusal, the averted eyes, the disbelief that God could bring victory through so few. Yet he did not let anger rule his heart. His duty was not vengeance, but obedience. He pressed on, trusting that the Lord himself would judge what was right. And after the battle was won, after Zebah and Zalmunna fell, Gideon returned to those cities, not in pride, but in justice. For leaders must not only conquer enemies outside their walls, but confront the weakness within their own people. The lesson was clear. Faith must walk hand in hand with compassion, and courage means more than taking up arms. It means standing with those whom God has called, even when the outcome is unseen. So Gideon's return was not a march of wrath, but a solemn reminder that when God calls his people to stand together, those who turn away from mercy turn away from his blessing. And though judgment came, it was measured for even injustice. The Lord's purpose is to awaken hearts, not to destroy them. When all was done, when the Midianites were defeated, when peace finally came to the land, the people came to Gideon with a request. Rule over us, they said, you, your son, and your grandson. You have saved us from the hand of Midian. It must have been tempting. Power, authority, a dynasty, recognition for all he had done. But Gideon had learned his lesson well. I will not rule over you, he said, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. He knew, deeply knew, that it was never about him. It was always about God. The victory was the Lord's. The glory belonged to him. Gideon was just the clay jar, cracked and broken open so that the light of God could shine through. Because of Gideon's victory, the land had peace for 40 years. An entire generation grew up without the terror of Midianite raids, without the locusts of enemy armies devouring their crops. Children played safely, families prospered, all because one fearful man learned to trust an unfailing God. But time has a way of softening memory. When Gideon grew old and his hair turned silver, he watched as the hearts of the people slowly drifted once again. Gratitude faded into complacency and faith into forgetfulness. After Gideon's death, Israel forgot the Lord who had delivered them. They turned again to idols, to the false gods of the nations around them. The altar stones of the Lord grew cold, and the echo of his name was heard less and less in the land. Still, Gideon's story remained, the story of a man who trembled at his calling yet obeyed. A man through whom God showed that courage is not the absence of fear, but the presence of faith. And though generations would rise and fall, that truth would endure. That God can do mighty things through the humble heart that dares to believe. Gideon's story reminds us that God doesn't need our strength. He doesn't need our impressive credentials or our human strategies. He needs our availability, our willingness, our trust. He takes the weak things, the small things, the insignificant things, and through them he does the impossible, so that everyone will know, beyond any doubt, that the victory belongs to him alone. 300 men, trumpets and torches, and a God who keeps his promises. That was all that was needed. And so we come to the end of Gideon's story tonight. From the fearful farmer hiding in a wine press to the faithful warrior who trusted God against impossible odds. What a journey. As you rest here now, let Gideon's story settle into your heart. Perhaps you feel small tonight, inadequate, like you don't have what it takes for the battles you face. Maybe the odds seem overwhelming, the enemy too strong, your resources too limited. Remember the 32,000 reduced to 300. Remember that God delights in using the small, the weak, the unlikely. Not because he can't work through the strong, but because his power is most clearly seen when human strength is removed from the equation. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. God met Gideon's fear again and again with patience, with signs, with encouragement. He didn't condemn the doubt. He gently led Gideon from fear to faith. Step by step, confirmation by confirmation. He does the same for you. Whatever you're facing, whatever seems impossible, remember that God's arithmetic is different than ours. When he makes a promise, he keeps it. When he says he will go with you, he will. When he declares victory, it's already won. We just need to trust and obey. Let your breathing slow even more now, deep and peaceful. Feel your body relaxing completely into rest. Every muscle, every thought releasing. You are safe. The God who was with Gideon is with you. The battles you face, they belong to the Lord. The outcomes you worry about, they're in his hands. Your part is simply to trust, to step forward in obedience, to let his strength shine through your weakness. Like clay jars broken open so the light can shine through. That's what we are. Fragile vessels, cracked and imperfect, but filled with the treasure of God's presence. And when we break, when our strength gives out, that's when his light shines brightest. Rest in that truth tonight. Let it bring you peace. Let it quiet your anxious thoughts. Let it ease your worried heart. You don't have to be strong enough. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to face impossible odds in your own power. You just have to trust the one who goes before you, the one who already knows how the story ends, the one who has already declared victory. Breathe deeply now, slowly, peacefully. Let sleep come gently, naturally. Your mind quiet, your heart at rest. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. He has called you. He has equipped you. He will fight for you. And in the morning when you wake, you'll rise with the same truth that sustained Gideon. God is faithful. His promises are sure. And His love for you never fails. Rest now, dear one. Rest in the arms of the God who turns the impossible into His greatest victories. Good night, and God bless you.